The Gap and the Gain by Dan Sullivan and Ben Hardy. The author of this book said that the concept of the gap and the gain is a masterclass on positive psychology, healthy relationships, mental well-being, and high performance. Everything psychologists know about how to create a high-functioning and successful person can be achieved through the gap and the gain. This leaves us wondering, what the hell is the gap and what the hell is the gain? Let's talk about it. I'm going to go over the chapters in this book, things I liked about it, things I maybe wasn't so crazy about, some standout quotes, who I recommend this book to, as well as what books to maybe check out next. Just so you guys know, there are affiliate links in the description. If you buy anything through those links, like maybe this book, then I get commission, which helps me build this channel and keep making these videos. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Sam, and I want to make self-growth normal, because people shouldn't have to look this information up. It should just be mainstream knowledge. If you agree, then please make sure to smash that like button. To give you an idea of the vibe of this book, the name of the introduction is Why Most People Aren't Happy, okay? And it takes up about 15% of the book. There aren't that many chapters. They say when your happiness is tied to something in the future, your presence is diminished. And when you're chasing happiness externally, you're disconnected internally. And when you're disconnected internally, you are in something called the gap. The gap and the gain are two ways in which we can measure ourselves. The gain is appreciating all you've accomplished. I really hope this is a book about the relationship between the two and not just about why one is bad and the other is good. And I'm also hoping I'm not going to have a big issue with the overall message of the book, and I'm somewhere in between the gap and the gain on the whole thing. What the book turned out to be, it didn't really turn out to be all that much about the relationship between the two. For some reason, I didn't find that to be a bad thing. And I also really didn't have that much of a big issue with the overall message of the book. I'm definitely not somewhere in between the gap and the gain on the whole thing either. The Gap and the Gain explains why there are millionaires with substance abuse issues and struggling with serious depression, and why there are homeless people who are happier than anyone you'll ever meet in your life. And when you measure others by the gap, all you see is what they could be and not what they are and where they've been. What's strange to me about this is that the gap is about things that haven't happened yet, but they might not even happen, which kind of is where that anxiety stems from. Meanwhile, the gain is about what has happened, which you can't even change. The thing you can change is obviously really just like the way you look at it. But I get the sense that not everyone looks at it like that. So a little background on the writing of this book. This book was written by a brilliant dude named Ben Hardy. And the main concept he attributes very, very heavily to a heralded entrepreneurial coach named Dan Sullivan. The audio version includes multiple interviews with Sullivan, one for each chapter actually. And what separates Dan Sullivan from other coaches is exclusivity, and to an extent, for sure, eliteness. This guy is like your favorite coach's favorite coach. Tony Robbins writes books, okay? Sullivan doesn't, but a lot of his clients do, like Ben Hardy. It cost me $75 to see Tony Robbins once in Philly. It was awesome. But Sullivan charges $10,000 per quarter. Per quarter, not per hour. Tony Robbins is all over social media. Dan Sullivan, I looked up a list of his most notable clients and couldn't find any. What gives? But the stories you hear and the results his clients in this book get are totally insane. And the way you hear him, like what he says about his clients, like he really explains how they're not like most people. I first heard about him in a $2,400 Dean Graziosi course. Exclusive. Elite. He's not that accessible, but when you do hear the name Dan Sullivan, it's probably worth paying attention to. I listened to that interview from the intro, and it's very, very illuminating. And that's just the intro. The longer I listen to this book, the more I listen to Dan Sullivan talk, and I was like, damn, I love the way this guy thinks. There are two parts. The first one is get out of the gap, and the second one is, as you probably guessed, get into the game. Chapter 1 is embrace a freedom of wants, avoid the attachment of needs. The beginning of this chapter discussed the philosophy of a very bright football player named Trevor Lawrence, who was one of the most elite high school and college players of all time, with like 30 wins and 50 wins and like 2 losses at both. Something along those lines. It's just a very unmatchable track record. I think they mentioned later in an interview that Ben Hardy actually went to high school with this guy. But Trevor Lawrence said at some point that he doesn't need football, he could live without it, and the press totally lost it over this. Not just the press, but like pretty much everyone, including other players who looked up to him. I don't understand this. It's so stupid to me. I don't know. If someone has the humility to say that with a track record so impressive, why question it for literally anything other than an explanation, of course? When you're in the gap, you operate on need rather than want. By the way, this is a choice. It's a choice people make to do this, often a subconscious choice. You feel like you need to get the next achievement in order to be happy and successful, and that obsession might lead to a great level of achievement, but even if it does, you feel disconnected from others and yourself. Chapter 2, Be Self-Determined. Define your own success criteria. The author discussed in this chapter self-determination theory, ultimately reference points and how we all measure ourselves against something, and how children today are taught to measure themselves externally through the educational system or social media, where they're flooded by like ideals 24/7. Every chapter ends with a conversation between Ben Hardy and Dan Sullivan, and these conversations, they're just as good, if not, I don't know, I found them more enjoyable than the rest of the book for some reason. I just love the way Sullivan thinks. I love it, and you can absolutely tell how that thinking sheds its own light onto Hardy. Not in the sense that like Hardy has been following him since he was like 7 years old, and you know, now he's rapping on the same album as his, you know, idol Dr. Dre. Something that separates them is really how supremely educated Hardy is. He doesn't have like 30, 40 years of experience accurately telling entrepreneurs how to be better entrepreneurs, but he does have a PhD in organizational psychology. And of course, he makes sure to tell everybody that he's a doctor in every one of his books. Because if you have a PhD, I didn't even go to college, but I'm pretty sure that means you're a doctor, technically. Chapter 3, The Compound Effect of the Gap or Gain. Transform your brain to see gains. Here's a game changer I learned from this chapter. Not a gain changer, but a game changer. It's called mental subtraction. Research shows that imagining the absence of a positive event in your life has a more powerful effect on you than just looking back on the positive event. Same thing goes for romantic relationships. What if right now you lost your good health, or your eyesight, or your hearing, or an arm and a leg, or your romantic partner? That's probably worse than any other one, and it probably is for me. Maybe you already don't have one of those things, but maybe you have a friend or family member that you're really close to, or like a role model or something. What if they died? What if there was no more to it? What would your life be like? It hits different when you really vividly close your eyes and try to imagine loss of access to something that you have that's so important to you. You know what they say, you don't know what you have until it's gone. It may sound dark, but just try that. Try imagining your life without something important to you and what it would be like right now. Pause this for 5 seconds if you have to, but make sure to hit play so you can see the rest of the review. Part 2 is Get into the Gain. With chapter 4, always measure backwards, increase your hope and resilience. Instead of measuring success forward, this chapter tells you how to measure success backwards. When I say this out loud, I still can't help thinking, man, there's gotta be a sweet spot where you can put one foot in the former and one in the latter. Some people do this. Some people go to bed every day thinking, what are the 3 best things that happened today? Or what are my 3 big wins from today? And then they'll ask themselves, what are my 3 main objectives for tomorrow? Or what are the 3 main wins that I want to happen tomorrow? That's a game changer. All of this is. I've never heard of this though, measuring backwards. I get the feeling that it's hard to check out a book like this without looking back on your past and how far you've come in the last several years. Something else Hardy said that stood out about Sullivan is that Sullivan provides a lot of simple explanations that make the psychological world make sense. But the actual conversations seem like a more intellectual based and less visceral, and maybe to a degree, I might be reaching here, but maybe like spiritual version of what you might hear in like Can't Hurt Me or Never Finished by David Goggins. When you put together a book partnership with Dan Sullivan and Strategic Coachings, that is one way to know that you've probably made it in life. Chapter 5 is Measure 3 Wins Daily. Maximize the highest leverage hour of your day. When you hear most important hour of your day, you probably think of the first hour of the day. It's actually the last hour of the day. And if you don't believe that, well, I didn't until I checked out this chapter. My biggest takeaway from it was an app that Dan Sullivan actually had created for his own company called Win Streak that lets you immediately and easily write down 3 wins for for today and 3 wins for tomorrow. I just downloaded it. By the way, at the writing of this video, my fiance and I, getting married in December, just moved to Easton, PA after living for 2 years in Pittsburgh, where our experience was a learning experience at best. I start a new sales job in four days. I cannot wait. And we're going through a lot of changes in life. It's a great time to listen to books like this when you're going through a lot of changes at once in your life. New job, new apartment, new spouse, etc. And lastly, chapter 6, transform every experience into a gain. Take ownership of your past. The main idea is that the gap is a default. It sort of chooses us, and it's our choice whether or not to let it keep choosing us, but momentum is the key to controlling this specifically. I know that this is not the main objective of it, but I think this book, more than any others I've checked out, I've reviewed over 300 nonfiction books on this channel, tells you how to look back at things constructively instead of toward things with dread or worry of them not happening like you want them to. It really was a solid book. I remember checking his other one out, Willpower Doesn't Work, and it seemed at the time like it sort of ripped from Compound Effect as it came out 8 years later. But this was pretty revolutionary, especially as a mindset work. It's really hard to write a good mindset book nowadays. It brings a really new approach to the actual substance of new perspectives in a book. Definitely a top 5 potential for this year. Quotes, the day you stop racing is the day you win the race. Winners don't have a to-do list, they have a done list. Being successful in other people's eyes doesn't always make you successful in your own eyes. It's not the losers who commit suicide, it's the winners. You're here. Be here. You can only be manipulated by the degree to which you measure yourself against ideals. If you're not paying for the product, then you are the product. This morning I emailed him about my desires for this book, and he said, are you in the gap or in the gain about this? Direction 1. I think this book would be great for any goal-oriented person who's having trouble looking back at the past or having trouble appreciating how far they've come. This is nothing like the woo-woo fairy tale, breathe in, breathe out spiritual books that you've heard of or checked out. That's just a silly, reductionist, maybe immature way of putting that, by the way. I actually love those books. But this is a technical and yet easy to understand and very refreshing take on appreciation for where you're at. Direction 2. If you like this book, check out Willpower Doesn't Work, also by Benjamin Hardy, and Millionaire Success Habits by Dean Graziosi. That book is fire. The Gap and the Gain by Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy. There's a link in the description if you guys want to check it out and read the reviews. That and any other books that I mentioned in this video if you want to check those out too. If there are any other books that you guys want me to check out and review, please let me know in the comments below. Also let me know if you checked out this book and you liked it. But hey, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, because I don't get why people watch this far into my videos and they don't subscribe. But if you have subscribed and you want to turn it up just a notch and turn on that notification bell to get a notification whenever I drop new videos, that would mean the world to me. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. You can find me everywhere and I will see you then.